Hello Internet, my name is David, and today I'd like to talk to you about this multi-$1,000 stack of Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs records that I'm about to pack up and return to them as a result of the class action lawsuit where they got caught deceiving us into thinking that these are all analog recordings when actually there was a digital step in the process. I'd like to talk about how I wound up acquiring so many of these if I actually now have discovered after the fact that they actually do not sound as good as they could. How that came to pass. Everybody keeps thinking that this is just some like purist movement where we just don't like the intellectual concept of a digital step. That's not the case with me. I do feel deceived, and I'd like to talk about how did I wind up acquiring such a collection if actually it turns out in the end I don't like the recordings. Oh God. Okay. So how did I come to this? So I kind of been into music since I was a kid. My dad kind of had a stereo. He didn't do the whole full audiophile thing that I've wound up walking down. But I've been doing this for a long time. When I was in college, over 20 years ago, I was buying records just to kind of explore music because they were $1 and there was no streaming, so you'd have to buy a CD or a record for $1. This was at like the absolute low of record sales. So I was exploring a lot of new music for $1 at the record store, and I bought like a $40 turntable on eBay. And then once I graduated, I kind of thought, okay, do I want to proceed down like the digital path or the pure analog path? And I didn't have the experience with analog at the time from an audiophile standpoint, so I went digital. So, I had a decent, digital front end with an SACD player because I definitely thought that CDs kind of sounded like crap. But SACDs really had promise. Obviously, it didn't really take off the way that I wanted it to. It didn't become mainstream. It always became niche in the audiophile community. But bottom line is, my original audiophile material was digital. And it wasn't really until, I don't know, a little bit over 10 years ago that I started exploring the audiophile LP world. It did start in college though, actually when I went to the record store. I think you can even see this has a price tag of $1 on it from the Record Exchange in Eugene, Oregon. This is Al Stewart, Year of the Cat. It was $1, and I loved it, and I thought it sounded great. And I also saw on the shelf this original master recording. And it was $10, I think. And I was like, well, I don't want to spend 10 times the price on this. But anyway, years later, I wound up acquiring this one on eBay. It was still probably about $10, and it just annihilated my original pressing. So that was my first exposure to the world of audiophile LPs. Up until about like 2014, definitely my primary listening medium was digital CDs, SACDs. I had a Clear Audio Champion turntable, which was good, but I liked my digital source better. But then I upgraded my cartridge to a Clear Audio Maestro, which was, at the time about the same cost as my whole turntable, and it elevated the whole game. At this point, LPs were sounding better than CDs, SACDs, and I was like, oh wow, I should really invest some money into a better turntable, and that's when I bought this VPI HRX with the rim drive, and I moved that Clear Audio Maestro cartridge over, and it was a whole new world. Music had never sounded better and more realistic than it had to me with this turntable and the setup that I had going at that time. So that's when I really started diving deep into this world of audiophile LPs. I had basically all the SACDs available for the music that I wanted. I still have a stack of them. I really like them. But I was finding that with some of my LPs that I bought for $1 in college, the Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti, I have a first US pressing, and it just annihilates anything else that I've ever heard. Moody Blues, some of those LPs sound just absolutely stunning. And again, I paid like $1 for them in college. And then I remember this situation with this Al Stewart. And I started diving into some of these other Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab recordings. Supertramp, Crime of the Century. Now, the catalog number on this is very low. I think this was one of the first 10 that they made, in the late 70s. And then I got Yes, Close to the Edge. And again, these are all analog, right? These actually are all analog. And in each case, I have several of these original MoFi records. And in each case, they annihilated the originals. So I was like, MoFi is a great place to go for quality records. Every time I bought them, these three, I have the Beatles White Album, they sounded better. They sounded better than the original. So I started acquiring more of the recent records. So again, most of my source material was digital. I only have a few. I had like 100 LPs at the time. I had thousands of CDs and SACDs. My first time I heard so many of my favorite recordings was digital. It wasn't analog. I don't have a whole back catalog of original pressings to go from, I'll talk about these in a bit, but like these Dire Straits albums, I love them. And when they came out on SACD, I was so stoked. So that was my reference recording. It was the digital. I didn't have an analog copy of it. I didn't want to. I had enough experience trying to get original pressings and just being disappointed time and time again. Like you go to the store and it looks clean, but then you put it on your turntable and it's just so noisy and so annoying. And I listen quite loudly, and I really want to have like again, that emotional involvement. I want it to sound real, and real music when you're in the room with a rock band is loud, and I want to recreate that in my home. And when you get a noisy record, it's just I can't tolerate that much noise. And of course, then there's just the detail, right? That a lot of these records were worn out. Sometimes they look clean, but they're worn out. I would buy like 3 of these records, each time be disappointed with it, and it was just like not worth it for me. It was way too much effort. This was like before Discogs was really a big thing. But again, I'm sure many of you know the experience on Discogs about people saying it's near mint and then you get it and it's just like surface noise the whole way through. So anyway, I just started getting into these audiophile LPs really when I bought the VPI. And that's when I started doing the deep dive into some of these records. So very often when I bought an audiophile LP, it was literally the first time I had ever heard the LP version of it. I didn't want to do this whole sourcing. I didn't have all the analog original pressings to compare it to. All I had was this audiophile LP that I was getting. And I had some killer original examples that I already showed you. And I was buying from Analog Productions, and I was buying from Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs, and I just kind of assumed that there was an equivalence there. I assumed that they had a similar process, and they usually had different titles. I didn't buy the both titles when they did have the both titles. Sometimes I'd read reviews, and I'd buy the one that seemed to get the better reviews. But I wasn't buying multiples of everything. I know we all watch these YouTube videos where everybody's comparing it against like 4 copies or 10 copies. Who are these people? Like, I have one. I don't want to do all that work. I just want to buy the best copy. I don't want to tinker. I want to put it down, and I want to be emotionally moved and transported to the place where the music was recorded. That is my goal. And I got that experience with LPs more than anything before. And then I will say, so this came out and it was $100, and I was like, oh my god, do I really want to spend $100 on a record? And I decided to go for it. And there is no doubt that this Abraxas sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm so glad that I bought it. And that was really, that opened the floodgates for me. I'm like, okay, these one steps are the best recordings that you will ever get. I'm gonna buy every single one that comes out, and I did that. And then that's really what opened the floodgates for all my buying. Again, this was 2016, like 8 years ago, and I just, anytime something came out, I bought it. This was a little bit later, but let's talk about these Dire Straits. These were announced, I think, 2016-ish, and I jumped on them immediately. I bought them all because the Dire Straits is just one of my favorite bands. I don't normally like much 80s. I'm more of a classic rock kind of person, like, 60s, 70s, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Morrison, but I really love Dire Straits. And again, I had the SACDs, right? So when I got these, I put them on one by one, and I remember, like, man, that's a lot of detail. I hear all the nuance, I hear all the detail, but I just found myself like not emotionally moved, and I was like, that's weird. I just would have thought it would have been better because the SACDs are so good. I didn't really do a direct comparison between the SACD and the LP. I think I liked the LP better, but I was always disappointed in these. And I thought in my head, well, I guess the source material is just not that good. And I guess Dire Straits wasn't a great band in the studio after all, and the mastering wasn't actually that good. Because here we have the original master recordings, and they don't sound that great. They don't emotionally move me. I guess they're not that great. So I was disappointed, and it's crazy. When all I had was digital, I listened to the SACs of Dire Straits all the time. With these, I think in the time that I've had them, I've played each of them maybe twice. I love the music, but I find myself just bored when I listen to them. So then what I wound up doing, once this whole digital gate thing came out, is I wound up buying an original pressing of Making Movies, because I didn't have one. I didn't have LPs of any of these, and I bought this. It was said to me mint on Discogs, and I paid not much, $25, right? A lot less than this. And I listened to it, and it was noisy as hell, and I returned it. But it annihilated this recording. It had so much more presence and realism and dynamics and punch. You know, this might have more, I don't know, it's like antiseptic. There's a cleanliness to this that is inviting. I think that's why people get suckered with these MoFi recordings. They have so much nuance and detail, and when you like compare it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, you're like, oh yeah, I think I might hear something more on the MoFi. But when you actually sit down and listen to an album, you just like start tapping your foot and grooving to the music. And with the MoFi, I just never do that. I'm just sitting there. I find myself analyzing, but I'm not being emotionally moved by the music. And I think these Dire Straits albums, more than well, as much as any, kind of show that. Every single one of these recordings that I have in this stack, I did not have an original recording of. Layla by Clapton, didn't have an original recording. I guess it's not Clapton, it's Derek and the Dominoes, sorry. I didn't have one. I bought this, and I was like, yeah, that's okay, but not really moving me. I actually had this on back order, and it wound up shipping after the whole thing came out. This is, sorry, just not that great. I bought this after it was out of print. I paid probably $100 for it, and now of course it's back in print and you get it for $60. But it just sounds grating to me. I don't have an original. Now I understand why it might sound like that though. This, I do have an original. I have a US first pressing that I bought for $1. And when this one came out, I didn't do that comparison. I did it after the fact. And again, same thing. The clarity is present here. It's just not emotionally involving in the slightest. Here's an example of another thing I did. This was out of print. And they said limited run. So I am not a flipper. As you can see, I still have 3 copies. What I am is an investor. And I invest in things that I am aware of. It's like any investment strategy tells you, invest in things that you're passionate about that you actually understand the market of. I watch the appreciation of these things. So, you know, you'll see I have multiple one steps because they would sell out on pre-order, right? And I've gifted some to friends actually. Sorry for the bad gift. Now that we know it's digital and it's not the best version, but I would invest in them, and I didn't sell them. I didn't flip them. I have them all still. They're about to go back to MoFi for a refund because the market has tanked on these. Remember these? This sold out immediately, and these were going for 3x what they were released at. Anyway, those are going back. Market tanked on those. Can't get anything for those. This is a perfect example of. I thought this sounded great when I bought it. I had never heard any other version of this. You can see this is one of the older boxes. This is model number 3400. So I'd never heard another pressing. I thought this sounded great. Of course, then the UHQRs from Analog Productions came out. I bought the 33 and a third, and it annihilated this. And then I bought the 45, which this is a 45, and I know this is different source material and all that, but it's not even close. It's disgusting. Carole King, Tapestry. Boring. This recording is so boring. This pressing, I should say. I love the album. It's the only copy that I have on LP, but it's just not exciting. They're going back. Muddy Waters, Folk Singer. This is one that I bought on Analog Productions 45, and this is close. This one's actually close. It's very different. The approach sounds quite different than the Analog Productions. I don't have a favorite, so I bought one to sell down the road as an investment, and I bought one to keep. I'm actually keeping that one because I think that's a good comparison. I like it. It sounds good. These other ones, not so much. Paul Simon, I'm not a big fan of this album. Kept it sealed. I'm sending all these sealed albums back. Janis Joplin, Pearl. It's nuts that they did this, right? Because they already put this out on 45 RPM on the regular process. Sold out. It was a limited run, right? So then they one-step it. They just take the same file and they do the one-step process. So it's better vinyl. Honestly, I like the regular 45 issue better than this. I couldn't believe it when I put this on. This was when I was still a believer that this is the best kind of recording you could get. The regular 45 issue actually sounds better than this. It's obviously down to the pressing because the source material is identical. It's a DSD file. But yeah, I prefer the regular 45. That is my reference copy. It's my only other copy. I don't have an original. An original might sound better. These Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan is probably my favorite. I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. I do have the Analog Productions. And this one I felt I was confused with, because this was an early reissue that they did. Same thing, I have multiples of these. And the Analog Productions, I loved it. But Abraxas, I didn't have a comparison, but this was a revelation. So I thought for sure this is going to be better than the $60 Analog Productions, not special vinyl version. Well, it's not. I remember from the very beginning with these, I put them on, and it was the same kind of thing. I find myself like looking at my phone when I'm listening to this music, and I'm like, this is Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is one of my favorite artists. Why am I not engaged with the music? It's because it's, well, who knows? Let's just say it's because of the DSD step. What it is not pure analog. And the Analog Productions box set is phenomenal. I absolutely love it. And it's funny, because I used to listen to it all the time. And then I remember putting these on and being disappointed in how they would sound. But I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, but this is better than that, surely. But I'm constantly tweaking the stereo, right? I'm adding new things, doing things, and I'm just like, maybe it's just something I tweaked in the stereo. And maybe this recording doesn't show as well. And then this whole thing came out that these are digital recordings, and that was literally the first time I actually picked up and did the A/B. Most of us, I don't know. I want to listen to music. I know, like, this whole audiophile thing, people think that we just like to tweak things, and we're tweakers, and we just sit there doing A/Bs all day long. I hate that. I hate doing that. I have this money invested in this stereo to give me an emotionally moving experience, to get me as close to the musicians as I can. I want to sit down and listen to music. I don't want to tweak things. I don't want to compare. It's exhausting. I just want to sit back with a glass of scotch and listen and be moved by the music. So when this came out, I just put this on. Again, after the digital thing came out, that's when I finally did the comparison. A couple years later. Tin Pan Alley, of course, is the go-to, right? And I put that on, and I remember when that Analog Productions version came, just how, again, arresting you are when that kick drum comes in. It's spectacular. And it was all back when I went back to listen to that. And then I put this on, and I was, again, just, you get tricked, because in some way that, like, the detail, the noise floor is lower, but it's also kind of smushed. It's like somebody stepped on the vertical sound stage. That's another thing I found. I found way more air. When you get all analog recordings, there's way more air around the instruments. Things are isolated well here. You know, you could go boom, boom, boom. That instrument's there, that one's there. But they're also like kind of smushed on these all analog recordings. And the Stevie Ray Vaughan's a great example. There's so much air around the recording that's not present otherwise. So anyway, that's just my explanation about how I legitimately feel deceived by what they did. Because I don't have a million copies. I don't want to sit here and A/B all day long. I want to know that you are a trusted source, and I'm going to buy it from you, and it's going to be good. Because they built this whole purchasing, this stack was built on the reputation of these 4 records that I have here. All that money, all those thousands of dollars was built on the reputation of making all analog recordings. That's why it's deceptive. I don't want to buy 5 copies of everything. On my record stand, you'll find like, I don't even know how many. Less than 2% of my recordings do I have multiple copies of. I don't want to do that game. I just want to buy the one. I'll pay a premium if I know that it's going to be good and I trust you. And obviously now, Analog Productions gets my money all the time, because I don't think I have, now that I am doing more comparisons, I don't think I've ever had an Analog Productions record that loses out against the original. I can't separate, what's DSD, right? I'm not a recording engineer. I want to sit in my chair. I want to be emotionally transported to when the music was recorded. That's it. I don't want you to show me a graph about like what's better. Oh, I did a in-room test and it shows that I don't care about that, right? I care about how I feel. Music is about emotion for me. This is an emotional transportation machine. It's a time machine. That's what it is. I want to be transported to the source in the recording studio with the people. These records don't do that. Analog Productions does, and I think a big part of it is because of the digital step. And there's no doubt they deceived us. So thank you for the judgment, and I look forward to reinvesting the money in actual analog recordings. Thanks for listening. Hope it was interesting.